Kylen Mills is with me. Yes, you don't have to just look at me anymore, folks. And I got someone to play off of. I got someone with a different perspective. The Warriors won a road game. The pool party was raging. We're going to break it all down next. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. You follow Kylen Mills on all sorts of social media platforms at Kylen Mills. You can follow me, Cyrus, on Twitter at DogSurfRoadshow. Kylen, people have had enough of me. Give us your reaction, your recap to the Golden State Warriors finally winning a game, 126-110 in Toronto.
I mean, the good news is the Warriors have won a game without Steph Curry. So, hey, that's a positive. At least they won't go 0-6 on this road trip, because I literally had people tweeting at me like, the Warriors will not win without Steph Curry. So, I mean, that's already a positive. The second positive is that Jordan Poole is averaging 30 points per game when Steph Curry isn't playing or is out. And that, to me, is a huge telltale sign of what Jordan Poole is capable of doing. And like we've talked about throughout the season, Cyrus, that he seems to really just get jump started when he's in the starting lineup.
Yes.
Even when Steph Curry's in, and there were a couple games that Klay Thompson was out, when Jordan Poole started, like, he's been on fire. And like, to me, this just was like further evidence of that trend, that like there's something about like being in that starting rotation. I mean, I think floor spacing when playing with either Steph Curry or Klay Thompson is going to be different than it is with the second unit, because the second unit just doesn't have the same offensive threats, clearly. So that obviously does help. But like, still, like, I also think there's just like some type of mentality shift for Jordan Poole when he is playing in that starting unit, either without Steph Curry or without Klay Thompson, whoever he's stepping in for. And like, clearly it works, because he was just unbelievable last night. I think that's the obvious takeaway for a lot of people, just getting that career high 43 points. Jordan Poole is at his best. I mean, I say this all season, I feel like, but just when he's aggressive and like attacking the basket, not forcing outside shots, because like sometimes I think he does do that when he's not trying to do too much. And when there are times in the second unit, and I know we've talked about it all season, where like he's bringing the ball up, and I feel like a lot of fans notice this as well, that he dribbles too much and he's trying to do too much to create. It's like he's forcing things. And like when he lets the game come to him, and he looked patient last night. And I think that that's critical, because then he creates better shots for himself. His numbers go up, and he's able to put up 43 freaking points. I mean, how can you not be happy about that? And I think he had a fair number of assists, 6 assists. So, he was still facilitating as well, as he needed to. And then it also helped that he had Donte DiVincenzo in there, who is also a, really good facilitator. And DiVincenzo, I thought, looked good. And, I'm a big fan of his, but, he had 5 points only, but he was plus 12 in the plus minus category. He did have 6 assists. He had a couple of steals, which he seems to do every single game. I just love the X factor and intangibles that Donte DiVincenzo brings every single game. So I was happy to see him getting the start. I know after Steph Curry's injury, I had a couple people tweet panicking at me that we were going to have to watch Ty Jerome start with the starting 5. And people were like, no,
sure that was me? Was that me tweeting at you?
No, other people besides you, Cyrus. But
right.
Yeah, you might have been one of them. No, several people thought, especially based on some of Steve Kerr's comments following Steph Curry's injury, about like the need to, have some type of veteran playmaker always in the lineup, not just throwing a bunch of guys out there at the same time. And some people thought that potentially Ty Jerome would be in the starting rotation, but I like Donte DiVincenzo there. I thought he did well. He doesn't have to score a lot, once again, when he's playing with Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson. And when Draymond Green's shooting like he did, like, what was that about? So, I like DiVincenzo in with that rotation. And I thought that starting 5 did well last night. So that's a huge positive. If they can get that starting 5, into a groove while Steph Curry's off, I think they can go at least 500. And I got to look at looking at the teams ahead, I think there are a couple more winnable games. So another big takeaway for me from last night was Draymond Green hitting a couple shots is actually huge for this offense and helping space the floor. And you've also had JaMychal Green hitting a couple of outside shots. And I know we've criticized him a little bit for some of his shooting, but he went 2 for 3 from deep. And that's when he does help make a difference in spacing the floor. And same thing with Draymond Green. So those two bigs hitting a couple of threes, hitting a couple of mid-range shots, whatever, that made a big difference to me. So yeah, I think it was all positive, and there's a little bit more hope now with Steph Curry out that the Warriors can win some games. And I think they will win a few more on this road trip.
So, well, they got 2 more. Tomorrow they play the Knicks. And then I think they finish up the road trip Wednesday at Brooklyn.
And
I
then,
haven't looked at
so road trip and then coming back home, but still throughout Steph Curry's injury, I think they'll be okay. So Steph Curry should be out through the rest of the year. And obviously that's not a positive, but like a lot of people looking at that game schedule were thinking the Warriors were going to lose every game. And he very well may not come back until the end of the first week, because I've heard he's being reevaluated after 2 weeks, which would be like the end of December. December 28th was a date that was actually thrown out there by, I believe it was Shams Charania. But even after that, then it will be another week or two. So we're looking at maybe a week into the new year. I think that the group we saw last night can win games, which I know a lot of people were very skeptical about, given the offensive workload that Steph Curry has had to bear the last several weeks in this entire freaking season. But if Jordan Poole can play like that, I think the Warriors will be okay.
Yeah, and Dante DiVincenzo. And you're right. I saw this stat where if Draymond scores, and I still don't know if it's confirmed or not. Someone tweeted it, and no one has disagreed or countered this. But apparently, if Draymond Green scores 10 or more points in a game, the Warriors win 80% of the time. And obviously that stats changed after last night, but for the better. If that's true, great. And you're right, because oftentimes when Draymond Green's on the floor, teams play like a 4-on-5 type defense, daring him to shoot, and he burned him last night. The only counter to that, unfortunately, is that the first 5 shots of the game, and I mentioned this last night, were all made threes by Siakam and Draymond. But Siakam's 2 threes were by Draymond Green's defense, basically just daring him to shoot those, and he made them. But he still got a +3 in terms of net. I want to share this poll that's currently on our Twitter account, @LockedOnDubs. This question was asked this morning, and I said I would show this on the show. And the poll is going to stay open for through tomorrow. And the question is, does Steve Kerr deserve any of the blame for the Warriors being a game under 500, which is where they currently are? And they still, despite winning last night's game in Toronto, own the worst road record in the NBA. Yes, the rotations are bad. No, Kerr's dealing with with cards that are dealt to him, or there's a combination of yes and no. And for those watching the show, you can see the poll reaction so far. 30.9% say yes, 27.2% say no, and 42% say it's a combination of the two. A lot of reactions to this. Before I get to the reactions, what are your thoughts on Kerr so far? I'm going to save a point that I want to make later in the show, because there is something that's colossally concerning me this year. And I'm going to share that with you and everyone else in just a moment. But what are your thoughts on Steve Kerr so far this year? Are you happy with how he's doing? Are you disappointed? Do you think what do you think? Yeah, give us your take on Steve Kerr.
I'm really curious as to what is going on behind the scenes and how on the same page the front office and Steve Kerr are about the timelines for these players. And something that Steve Kerr said a couple days ago in an interview on 95.7 The Game, he does them every week, was just that it does take players time, especially players who did not compete in college. The topic of Brock Purdy came up in regards to how he's suddenly been able to come in and be this superstar for the 49ers as a rookie. However, he did play 4 full years of college. And Steve Kerr said that he thinks there are some comparisons to the NBA when you get players who come in and played 3 games in college, hint, hint, or played a abbreviated, I don't know how long the G League Ignite season is, but 8-game, 10-game, whatever, when you played a G League Ignite season and no collegiate basketball. And so that really makes me curious as to how on the front page Steve Kerr and the front office are, because to me, it's very clear that the front office believed and went into the season constructing the roster under the belief that these youngsters in their second season would be ready to be contributors.
Thank you.
Is there some type of disconnect? Was Steve Kerr on the same page when they were constructing this roster? I mean, these aren't questions I have the answers to, but they are things that I start to have some suspicions on, because it's not adding up. It's not adding up. And based on the moves that this front office made during the offseason, like, it's clear to me that like Wiseman, Moody, and Kuminga were very much expected to be very big role players on this bench. And to me, it sounds like Kerr is saying that's not a fair expectation of them. Well, then what was the plan? Because to me, clearly this was the front office plan, because they didn't make too many other, veteran additions like they had last year, and they let those players go that were those big role players last year. So I do think that some of the blame has to fall in the front office, clearly. Now, Steve Kerr, let's say he didn't agree with this. He's like, I don't think these guys are going to be ready. Let's just say all this is hypothetical, theoretical, whatever. I still think he could be doing a better job of getting them minutes, because like, if this was a situation where the front office believed they were ready, he doesn't feel like they were ready, but sitting them, I don't think is helping either, especially given that the team is losing. So I think it would be a different story if the Warriors came out and they were dominating with him playing JaMychal Green and Anthony Lamb, and even now, and some injuries, Ty Jerome. I think it'd be a different story. Like, if the Warriors are running the table right now with the youngsters sitting, then you say, all right, well, we can't risk them affecting winning or them potentially leading to losing. So fine. But when the team is a game below 500, I mean, how much they struggled early on in the season here, that's where I see the opportunity for development. And these players, if they're not ready, the only way they're going to get ready is by playing. And, to me, especially Moody and Kuminga are kind of an interesting anomaly, to where, like, are they past playing in the G League but not ready for the NBA? Like, where are they at it to where their development can best be utilized? And I feel like they need NBA minutes, like versus James Wiseman. Like, I think he needed that run in Santa Cruz, and I would be shocked if he needs more run in Santa Cruz. But to me, like, Kuminga and Moody, like, need to be out there, and maybe they're not ready to be role players right now on a championship caliber team, but they can play in the NBA. And I think they just need more NBA reps, versus a Wiseman, I feel like, is much farther off from that.
All right. Well, and I'm going to pick your brain on that some more, because you previously said that you think Wiseman should continue playing in the G League.
Yeah.
But then they called him up for the rest of this road trip, only for him to see only garbage time minutes. And I'd love to get your opinion on that and so much more. First, got to give some love to Turo. We're in this weird environment in the world right now where it's not easy to find cars. The pandemic caused a shortage of them because of a chip shortage in terms of manufacturing, whatever. That's not the point of this ad. The point is, it's hard to find cars, whether you're trying to buy one, trying to rent one. And that's where Turo, the world's largest car sharing marketplace, comes into play here. Look, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. You can browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia. You could book that spacious SUV or minivan for the family. If you want a luxury car for a special event, they got that. Let's say you're considering buying an electric vehicle and you want to test drive it first. Try it out with Turo. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance, terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. Make sure to check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast after us. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Follow Kylen Mills on social media platforms at Kylen Mills. What was your take on last night? First of all, the scorekeepers had a doozy of a night. I don't know if you're watching the game early on, where I think they had like 7 stoppages of play in the first quarter because of the clock. And for some reason, the scorekeepers got Jonathan Kuminga's minutes wrong for like the entire game, because all of a sudden at the end of the game, like on the score sheet, it had him listed as 3 minutes. It suddenly went up to 5. And I'm like, I'm sitting here hosting a live post-game show, and I'm seeing that, and I'm going, oh, I guess he got 2 minutes in garbage time. Turns out, no, he didn't. He played 5 minutes early in the game in the first half, and then the scorekeepers just got it wrong. That was just a mess. But regardless, Moody, I think, gets 11 minutes for the night. Kuminga, some people said he might have gotten injured. I haven't actually read any reports on that, so I don't know if his limited minutes, the 5 minutes, was because of an injury. We mentioned James Wiseman played 2 garbage time minutes along with Patrick Baldwin Jr. and Ryan Rollins. You've talked about the minute distribution, and I'm going to reveal something at the end of the show, which is a revelation that is why I'm so concerned this year. Like, I'm borderline hitting a panic button now, and I'm going to explain why in just a minute. But what were your thoughts on that minute distribution, and just maybe adding on to what you're saying, and especially James Wiseman, because he could have still been in the G League instead of making this crazy trip, which involved really gnarly travel schedules, and his itinerary involved like a red eye. It just, I don't see what the point is of having Wiseman go on this trip if you're not going to play him. Your thoughts?
Well, absolutely. I think anyone would say that if you're going to pull James Wiseman from the situation he's been in the G League, then he better be playing, because the whole point of him getting that run in the G League was to build some consistency and to build some confidence over a longer period of time. And this is something I've been harping on and preaching for the last week or two, that like, I think that Wiseman does and did need that extended stretch in Santa Cruz, because like, game reps and playing time, huge. That's just what he needs right now. He has to play in live game situations. Like, you can only do so much through practice. He has to be in a live game. A, and B, he needs some time to build consistency and build confidence. And like, constantly yanking him from Santa Cruz and inserting him into the Warriors for a couple minutes only to get yanked out again as soon as he makes a mistake, to have a super short leash with the Warriors. And that's not going to help him, because to me, like Kuminga, to me, Wiseman's confidence is a huge issue. And just his feel for the game. And to me, like I said, just kind of putting him in those situations, if the Warriors were to constantly be, sending him to Santa Cruz, bringing him back, inserting him into a game, he makes a mistake, he gets pulled, he plays 2 minutes. Like, I just don't think that's at all going to help his development. To me, he needs that longer stretch of minutes and confidence building, and that's what he'd get in Santa Cruz. I understand, given the injuries, the reason why the Warriors brought him up, but he has to play. He has to play. James Wiseman getting 2 minutes doesn't do him any favors. It doesn't do the team any favors. Now, I will say, someone pointed out in the chat, maybe the plan was for him to play more. And because JaMychal Green and Draymond Green were both suddenly hitting all these big shots, the team was winning. Maybe they felt like the bigs that they had in at the time were, just lights out. So they didn't want to ruin that momentum. But at the same time, like, the Warriors had a sizable lead. I do believe that James Wiseman could have gotten more run without the Warriors losing. Because I know someone said in the chat too, well, Wiseman doesn't affect winning, doesn't impact winning. And that's honestly fair right now. But I do believe he could have gotten more than 2 minutes without, completely deterring the game for the Warriors. I just hope they find a way to get him in, because he needs to be in the games if he's going to be pulled from the situation in Santa Cruz. Otherwise, leave him in Santa Cruz. Leave him in Santa Cruz. I've been an advocate for that the whole time. Let him get an extended run there. Let him build consistency. And then we'll see what happens. And I don't know at what point you evaluate if he's ready to come back to the Warriors. But like I said, I was advocating for, a couple weeks, and then maybe reevaluate, bring him back up, see how he does. If he's not doing well, send him back. Like, I just think there's no shame in using that tool in the Santa Cruz Warriors to continue to develop players, which is something the Warriors have preached, that they're trying to get Santa Cruz to run a similar system. They want this to be, really a training ground for these players. Like, I don't know. I just think there's no shame in sending him there. If he is coming in to the actual NBA team and not playing well, like, just let him continue to try to build that confidence. I mean, there shouldn't be a rush. There is, but there shouldn't be when especially given James Wiseman's situation with the lengthy injuries, and we know his whole backstory, not really playing in college and all that stuff. Like, I just think he needs time playing.
Agreed. And in just a moment, I'm going to explain to you and everyone else why this year is different than all the other years of Lacob's tenure as the owner, along with Peter Guber. Before we go to the commercial break, I want to play this soundbite from Jordan Poole real quick, because he talks about how in this clip, the G League helped him become the player he is now, which, as we saw last night, is fantastic. 43 points. Here is Jordan Poole.
I constantly say it's just good to go down there and just play. See what type of player you are, what type of player you want to be. Use it as live drill work is what I did. I went down there and I personally just knew that I could lead a team and, try to lead guys to wins and try to make other people better and really attack that approach and just find ways to carried that over to whenever I was playing with the team now. And it's all perspective. It's never really like a demotion. It's just always an opportunity to continue to grow your game.
That's a great attitude from Jordan Poole. When we come back, Kylen, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. One is, in your opinion, what's going to happen with Game 50? That, to me, is one of the most intriguing questions for the Golden State Warriors right now. The reason why 50 games is relevant is because two-way players can only play a maximum of 50 games. And the 50-game mark is where Ty Jerome and Jonathan Lamb there's going to be a decision that's going to have to be made there. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that. I'm also going to be curious to know what your thoughts are on the fact that Bob Myers, we haven't touched on this. I brought this up with Rick Barry. I hosted a show with him over the weekend. Highly recommend checking that out, folks, because the Hall of Famer had some fantastic opinions on the state of the Golden State Warriors, which I think you'll want to listen to for sure. Again, it's on YouTube, the Rick Barry show. It's all over the place, podcast as well. But I'm curious to know, Kylen, what your thoughts are on the fact that Bob Myers is on the final year of his contract. This is a piece of information that came out relatively recently.
Yeah.
I've been touching on it a little bit. I don't think we've talked about it, and it might have a lot to do with everything going on. And of course, I'm going to reveal why this year again is different than all the other years and why there's a bit of a panic button, at least from my perspective. First, got to give some love to BetOnline, and more specifically BetOnline.net. They're such a prominent sponsor. They get an awesome overlay, which blocks Kylen. I'm sorry. But BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, for pro football, college bowl season, basketball, World Cup just finished. But soccer leagues continue on. So you can still bet on soccer. And if you love sports podcasts, they're not as good as us, but that's okay. You can still even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. So is Kylen Mills on social media. You can follow her on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Kylen Mills. What are your thoughts, Kylen? Let's start with the 50-game mark. What do you think's going to? Did I say Jonathan Lamb, by the way, earlier? That was my bad.
But you did, yeah. But I enjoyed it.
What do you think's going to happen? I'm fascinated. That is, to me, the question of the season so far. What are the Warriors going to do? Because it might reveal a lot about the thinking of the team. Maybe the 50 games was the plan all along, and that's the mark where they think, okay, now we roll in Iguodala, and now we think the youngsters are ready. Maybe they sign him to guaranteed deals, which I'm freaking out about. What are your thoughts on what's going to happen with the Warriors at that 50-game mark?
I mean, okay, so in my ideal world, by the 50-game mark or at the 50-game mark or whatever, in my ideal world, they would be acting now on signing another veteran big, which I've been saying, this is no secret. I've been saying for a while. They would be looking to add another athletic big who can help add some reinforcements and some size in the second unit. Do I think that'll happen? No, not really. Or that, they're working to execute a trade, they're signing a free agent, something. That's like my dream, but I don't think it's going to happen. Realistically, I wouldn't be shocked if they signed Anthony Lamb to that final roster spot. I mean, to me, it's very clear that the Warriors love Lamb. With Steph Curry healthy, I don't think there's as much of a need for Ty Jerome. He hasn't been able to get in the rotation when Curry's healthy because of his position. And, they've got Dante DiVincenzo. They've got a fair amount of playmakers. Dante DiVincenzo. They've been splitting up JaMychal Green to run the floor with the second unit. And so I don't see him, but I could see Anthony Lamb getting that final roster spot and then signing him so they can keep him around beyond those 50 games. In addition to that, I wouldn't be shocked either if we saw Andre Iguodala finally play. They continue saying, the Warriors, Steve Kerr, Andre Iguodala himself, there is a plan in place for him to play. There's just not a date set or a timeline. But if you ask me, I would imagine the loose timeline would be coming, coming, like you mentioned, maybe around the 50-game mark, maybe around the All-Star break. I mean, I think that we will see Andre play. I do. I don't think he's going to be a coach all season. I do think there is the plan. And like you said, maybe second half of the season, they knew up front he wouldn't, his body wouldn't be able to handle a full season. They wanted to save his, usage for, closer to the playoffs. And when the Warriors know in reality they need to start clicking. So those are my two predictions. I wish that it was different, but I would be shocked if Anthony Lamb ended up getting a roster spot.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm curious to see what happens there for sure. And someone mentioned Jay Crowder in the chat. I've read loose reports. This is very speculative about Jay Crowder possibly coming to the Warriors. I've read that. The reason why I'm super skeptical of that rumor is I just can't see the Suns giving the Warriors Jay Crowder when they're competing against each other. That would be very bizarre to me. But we'll see. Jay Crowder would be a fantastic fit. He would solve a lot of issues the Warriors have. The Bob Myers thing, I'm gonna ask that for you, and we'll close the show with this. And this leads into why this season's been concerning for me this year. When Lacob took over the team, one of the first things he did was he hired Bob Myers as his GM, and I can't remember how the timeline was exactly. Like, I can't remember if Myers was hired and then they did the Monte Ellis trade or which happened first. But basically, the Warriors, from the moment Lacob took over, they were active, right? They did the Monte Ellis trade. They got back Andrew Bogut. Made sense, right? The team didn't have a center for who knows how many years. That was legitimate. It was a blatant hole on this roster for decades. And then suddenly you get a former number one pick in Bogut, great defender, rebounder, so forth on your team. Made sense, right? That same season, this was Klay Thompson's rookie year. They then tanked. I don't know if folks remember that. This was a Mark Jackson production. Everyone agreed with it that because I can't remember what the team was that held their draft rights, but if they fell like to the 7th spot or below or the 8th spot or below, they kept their pick. If the Warriors had done decently well that season, they would have lost their draft pick. And the Warriors knew that was a solid draft. So they tanked. They never officially announced it. It was obvious to everyone. And then they got Harrison Barnes, right? As a result of that, this is what that draft pick turned into. So now you have a team with Harrison Barnes, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Stephen Curry, Festus Ezeli, Bogut's on the team. You still have Andre Biedrins. Kent Bazemore was actually decent back then. Jared Jack, in case you folks forgot him, was Stephen Curry's backup point guard, was an awesome player. And you start seeing growth there, and you start seeing this team emerge as the dynasty that they are now, right? And I feel like every single season in this Lacob tenure, the Lacob and Gruber tenure, there's been such fascinating and impressive logic and scheming and long-term planning in the decisions that they made all the way. Even the season where they won 15 games, that was necessary. Like, you didn't hear anyone in Dub Nation like crying over that. It was the Warriors were the worst team in the NBA. It resulted in James Wiseman, and there wasn't barely any gripes because everyone understood this is necessary. The team went through 5 years of wars and attrition. This group needs a rest if they're going to regroup and continue the dynasty. So it was all understandable. It made sense. It was logical. Kelly Oubre was a swing and a miss, but hey, they moved on from that relatively quickly. I still wish they would have used them as an asset to trade and get something back, but whatever. They recovered from that and they're fine. The point is, of this 10-plus year run of the Golden State Warriors with Joe Lacob, Peter Guber, Bob Myers, who's now in his final year of his contract, and Rick Barry was very stunned to learn about that as well. I am stunned about that as well. I think a lot of people are stunned and really don't know what to say about that. This is the first time in this team's entire run. And Mark Jackson was a great coach too, by the way. I don't want to dismiss him, and he's a part of the reason why I'm sometimes critical of Kerr, is because Kerr did not come in here and turn the ship around. That was actually Mark Jackson. Kerr just took him to a next level, and kudos to Kerr for that, for being the head coach of this dynasty. But this year makes no damn sense. I'm completely lost. Like, there are theories out there that make more sense than the reality we're watching in front of us. Now we're learning that Bob Myers is in the final year of his contract, which is weird. I mean, he could literally just get up and leave next year. What are your thoughts on Myers being in the last year of his contract, given he orchestrated a dynasty? You would think Lacob and company would want to keep him and lock him up. That's just really bizarre to me. And just everything I said in general, Kylen, your thoughts. I'm done. Your turn.
Yeah, well, when you first brought that up, I wanted to go back because I remember that tweet from Woj, like just a week ago, I think it was December 11th, where that was first brought up because according to Adrian Wojnarowski with ESPN, he was told by sources that, Bob Myers' talks with the Warriors are on a complete hiatus. And, there was a quote that says, my entire focus is on the season and this team. That's what Myers told ESPN without elaborating further when asked specifically about those reports that his contract is expiring in June and there are no negotiation talks going on right now. That is surprising to me. Now, on the other side, Joe Lacob was asked about this and he told ESPN, we love Bob. We hope he's here for a long time. That's all he said. It's a little concerning. It's surprising. It's concerning. I'm just shocked that they wouldn't be farther along in those discussions and negotiations if the Warriors were dead set on keeping Lacob, which they should be. I mean, I think that Bob Myers' fingerprints are all over the team the last decade. He signed on as the manager or as the general manager, a decade ago. He didn't specifically draft Steph Curry, but he has been instrumental in putting together all of these teams that have won 4 championships in the last 8 years. He's one of the most accomplished executives in the NBA. I think it's fair to criticize the team and some of the roster construction this year, as we've discussed Cyrus in regards to maybe expecting the young players to be further along than they are. But at the same time, he's built this dynasty. Bob Myers, has been the puppet master pulling the strings. And I think the Warriors should absolutely be trying to do everything possible to keep him. And I think that most people feel that way. I mean, what do you think? I mean, I would be surprised if people in Dub Nation are saying, no, let him walk. And what is his future if the negotiations aren't going on right now? Like, to me, that's odd. And what is Bob Myers' vision for his future? Maybe what is the asking price? Is that an issue?
Right.
So we'll have to see.
Yeah, we will. It is bizarre. It's fascinating. I've been hearing for a couple years now, Brent Barry's name linked to the Warriors. I think at one point they actually explored hiring him as their assistant GM. Interestingly enough, Brent Barry, his role with the San Antonio Spurs, who he's been with for quite a few years now, has changed where he's now the GM of the team's G League squad in Austin. And some are thinking that the logic behind that is the Spurs are grooming him to possibly take over for RC Buford, who I imagine will retire at some point. But the Warriors have always had an eye on Brent Barry, at least in recent history. And part of me wonders is if that's the plan, is if they're just going to let Myers walk, bring Brent Barry in, someone else they also respect. I don't support that. I think Bob Myers has earned whatever money. I mean, as long as it's within, the realm of reality, he's earned whatever he's asking for. It's crazy. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Someone just said in the chat, like, I could see if Myers is saying, let's deal with his contract after the season ends in an interest of putting the team first, but his contract is up in June. Like, if the Warriors make it to the finals, that there wouldn't be time. You know what I mean? Like, negotiations are going to have to go on during the season. Otherwise, he's gone. So to me, there's, I do get the mindset behind that, but like, there's not a choice at some point, because if it's that close, there's going to have to be some decisions made. I also was going to say, what about Kirk Lacob? Like, to me, that would also be someone who you'd assume, Lacob, that you would assume would also be in the mix potentially if Bob Myers were to leave, or would they look to make him Myers' successor?
I hope that doesn't happen. And for the simple reason, here's the thing. Kirk Lacob gets grief for obvious reasons. He's the owner's son, but he actually does know basketball. He did play, I think, as a walk-on for Stanford. So it's not like he's somebody who has no basketball background, and because daddy owns a team, he's in line to cozy up and for nepotistic reasons take over certain positions. With that said, I'm not a fan of nepotism. I've never in my life had a single thing handed to me. I don't think that shouldn't bear much relevance, except that I personally respect people who actually earn their place in this world and are not handed it. And regardless of how much basketball knowledge Kirk Lacob has, look, your dad's the owner of the team. I don't think that's a good look. I don't know if that would negatively impact the team, but I just personally wouldn't support it for those reasons. Everyone has their opinions on it. That's just mine. Do you have one on it, or I don't know? What do you think?
I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on it. I agree,
Yeah.
just due to, I don't know, the outside look of, hiring the owner's son as the GM would potentially, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I'm with
I
you.
mean, he
I'm
does
with you.
seem to know basketball. He does hold that position as the vice president of basketball operations. Like, I'm not saying it would be totally like off the wall, but I think there are also very competitive candidates out there that the Warriors should seriously consider.
Yeah. And, someone brought up before we go, no, not a bad reason about Wiseman, although some people have that feeling. No, it was a comment about college players and how they usually hit a wall. Here it is. This is from House of Reason 7-8. Rookies and second year players notoriously hit a wall around the 40th game because of the amount of games in an NBA season being sometimes double, if not more, than a college season, a high school season. Certainly, even the G League. They play more games in the G League. Might make some sense. I'm not sitting here saying that's out of the realm of possibility. Maybe that's a possibility. I don't know. And then Jamal Benta writes, and I love the optimism. I don't see Bob leaving. I wouldn't worry about it. 2023 champs. Let's hope. Let's hope. Anything to add, Colin, before we call it a show? That was awesome. I thought that was great.
No, that's it. Onward and upward for the Warriors. I think after their performance last night, I'm much more optimistic about the team's record without Steph Curry, but hopefully we do get some good news. We won't hear anything about him, I think, until about the end of the year when they are planning a reevaluation. But in the meantime, I think there's the potential for this team to win if Jordan Poole plays the way he did, if you get some outside shooting from the bigs, like we mentioned, both Greens. And I think there are some pieces in place. The Warriors should still be able to beat teams when they play well. I mean, that's the key. They have to bring defensive intensity. All those different players have to, do their roles on the offensive end. Jordan Poole being very aggressive, Klay Thompson being patient, not forcing up shots, I think is huge. Making the extra pass, huge from Klay Thompson. And then, like I said, when the bigs are able to hit some shots, that really does help keep defenses honest, spread the floor. And I think that this team could win some games. So I feel much better and more optimistic than I did when Steph Curry first got hurt just a week ago.
I love it.
So that's
I love it. If the Warriors win tomorrow night, I will start to share that optimism. The Toronto Raptors, if I learn anything in that game, is they might be the worst team in the NBA, and that's why I'm not as jubilant as a lot of people are. I mean, is there honestly, can you think of a team worse than them? I mean, maybe the Houston Rockets, but even they've got a young, exciting core. They might be the worst team in the NBA. All right, what do you think? Is that too out of left field?
I mean, the Pistons.
Yeah, they might be up there too. You're right. But if they win
there.
tomorrow night,
the Magic are up there for me.
Yeah. Well, the New York Knicks are a good team. They're 4 games above 500 this season. And so are the Brooklyn Nets. I think they're 7 games above 500 at the time we're recording this. The Brooklyn, 19-12 are the Brooklyn Nets. The New York Knicks are 17-13. So you and I will be hosting a show tomorrow after the game. We'll have your Warriors Knicks post game. Let's hope that great feeling continues, Kylen. I'm with you on that. And yeah, Carly, you're right. Toronto doesn't have the worst record. I'm just talking about just on the eye test. I mean, the Raptors are a bad team. They're going nowhere this season. And if the Warriors can pick apart that team, get some of the scraps from a potential blowout sale, I'd be all about that. Kylen, thank you. Always a pleasure. This is a great show, I thought.
Always a pleasure, Cy. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and dropping some comments. It's awesome.
Absolutely. We'll be back tomorrow again. Post-game, Warriors, Knicks. Stay tuned. Thanks, everyone. Bye.